Hey, this video is going to be all about argumentative ECRs. We're going to start off with common misconceptions. A lot of districts that I go to across the state of Texas, including region centers, including teachers, curriculum directors, principals, you name it, a lot of people have misunderstandings about argumentative ECRs. So I want to squash some of those misconceptions in this video. I'm Carlin Laborio, and this is a free online training. Thanks for being here. Okay, let's get into it. Here are some common misconceptions with argumentative ECRs. One thing I hear all the time going into school districts, I've seen this many times, where they will give an argumentative ECR, but the passage only has one side. This is not how it's going to be asked on STAAR. When you are given kids a STAAR passage with an argumentative ECR, it is super important that the article has both sides in the article. So basically, either way, if the students pick one side or the other, it is correct as long as they can back it up with text evidence. If the article doesn't have any text evidence to back up the other side, that is going to be a problem. And you're setting your kids up for failure. So instead, you need to make sure, and we're going to talk about the genres in a minute, but you need to make sure that if you're giving kids an argumentative passage, it has both sides in the passage. Okay, second misconception. A lot of teachers think that argumentative has to be a paired passage. That is not true. It can actually be a single standalone passage. I'm going to show you 6th grade and 7th grade as examples of those that were not paired passages. Another misconception is that argumentative has to be on an argumentative passage. That is also false. If you look at 4th grade and 6th grade 2025, these were not argumentative passages. These were informational. In fact, 4th grade that I'm going to show you has informational. It was a paired passage. It has informational was one of the passages, the second passage, and the first passage was actually literary nonfiction. And it asked students an argumentative writing prompt about food, about cooking using traditional dishes. Here's another misconception, not so much a misconception, but a question that I get all the time from teachers is a lot of elementary teachers will ask me, do my students have to write a letter on the ECR? Is there any way they would have to write a letter? The answer is no. Only 6th grade and up has the possibility of correspondence, which is writing a letter, writing the ECR in the form of a letter. And how you can see that, I'm going to show you a picture on the next couple slides. The 6th grade to English 2 argumentative rubric is where it states that it could be correspondence. 8th grade and up, we're going to look at the rubric. 8th grade and up also need to have that counter argument. They need to identify and refute the counter argument in order to get the full points. If you teach elementary school, just skip right on by that part. Okay, elementary school all the way up to 7th grade do not need the counter argument. Okay, so let's take a look at the genres and let's look at how argumentative has been tested in the past. So 3rd grade, the very first year of the STAAR test in 2023 had an argumentative on recycling, and it was a paired passage and it had both sides of the argument. So that was an example of paired argumentative passages. 4th grade last year, 2025, had an argumentative ECR for the first time, and they were given paired passages. Both of the passages, one of the passages was actually informational and the other one was literary nonfiction. They're both basically informational. 6th grade had an argumentative ECR for the first time last year, and it was in the form of a letter, and it was a single passage, and it was not an argumentative passage. It was informational. So I'm going to show you that. 7th grade had an argumentative the year before last in 2024. It was a single argumentative passage. And 5th grade has not had an argumentative yet, and neither has 8th grade all the way to high school. Now you might be thinking, are they getting one this year? Maybe. We have no way of knowing. Either way, we want to be teaching argumentative and informational ECRs to all grades because it is part of the TEKS. Okay, now these are the actual prompts that have been asked. So in 3rd grade, it was explain your opinion about why people should or shouldn't be rewarded for recycling. I want you to pay attention to the words that I put in red and take note of the clue words that tell you it's argumentative. So this one, 3rd grade, had the word opinion, it had the word or, and it had should or shouldn't. 4th grade just had explain whether or not people should make changes to traditional dishes. Okay, so that one didn't have or, it didn't have opinion. It just, the only clue word was whether or not. Okay. 6th grade, this one was really tricky. It doesn't even have the word explain. It does not have or, and it does not have should or shouldn't. Look at this. 6th grade, I copied the whole prompt here. The town council, a group of people who make decisions about town laws and policies, is considering closing off public access to a bat cave in your town to protect the bat population that lives inside. Here's the prompt. Write a letter addressed to the town council about whether public access to the cave should be closed off. So it doesn't even say whether or not, but that is implied when they use the word whether. Okay, and we're going to dive deep into that one because it's super interesting. Remember, only 6th grade and up has the letter. 7th grade, this was, like I said, let's go back. That one, 7th grade was 2024. Should students be involved in deciding how money is spent in their schools or communities through participatory budgeting, otherwise known as PB, okay? And then it had why or why not. Now, this is one of the very few ECRs that I've seen that actually has a question mark instead of a period. So it's asking them a question, should, and then why or why not. It doesn't say, should they be involved in how money is spent or not? That is implied. Okay, so just take note of how these have been asked in the past. Okay, let's look at how, this is my evidence or my proof of how 6th grade English 2 argumentative could be a letter. So see where it says at the top above the rubric that it may ask them to respond by writing a letter to a specific audience. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is off the record, but a lot of teachers have sent me messages and emails, so I feel pretty confident in saying this. The ones who have had to write a letter, it is not showing up in the score. So in other words, there are teachers who have seen in the scoring get 10s. The students have gotten 10s, even though they did not write it in the form of a letter. So what that inference that I can make from that is that it is more important, the author's purpose, that they are writing to the right audience, the town council, whoever it is, and it's the explaining, it's the word choice, it's the relevant evidence, and it is the complex sentences that matter more than writing it in the form of a letter. So I would not stress about the letter at all. I would focus on the other aspects of the ECR rubric. Okay. Also want to point out 8th grade English 2, argumentative needs the counterargument to be identified and refuted in order to get a 3 out of 3 for organization, development of organization and ideas. So I have highlighted it where it says that on the 3 on the argumentative rubric. Okay. If you look at the 2, it will say, and I'll link these in the description if you need help finding the rubric. If when you look at the 2, it'll say just identified. So the counter argument is just identified if it's a 2. And a 1, it doesn't even have the counter argument. Okay, so that is how they are going to score it. Now, remember, we have not had 8th grade English 2 has not had an argumentative up until now. So will they have one on the 2026 test? I have no idea, but that would be super interesting. I would love to see it. Okay, we're going to look at some really interesting ones. Let's look at, I think everybody kind of understands paired passages. Let's look at what it would look like if it's a single passage asking an argumentative ECR. 7th grade was a single argumentative passage, and 6th grade was a single informational passage. Let's see how the kids could come up with evidence when it's a single passage. Okay, so this passage was all about participatory budgeting, which is basically having the kids involved in the budget for the school. Okay, now page 1 is basically all the ways, we're going to call it PB, all the ways PB benefits students. If you look at page 2, this had lots of counter arguments or evidence against PB. Okay, so I've highlighted some of the main reasons, but these are essentially the counter argument. This is the other side of the argument. So as you can see, this is an argumentative text, but it has both sides of the argument so that the kids can choose one side or the other with plenty of text evidence. Okay, now we're going to look at 6th grade. 6th grade's super interesting. It's an informational passage about bats. The only part about protecting bat caves was at the end of the passage in paragraphs 10 and 11. Okay, it talks about paragraph 10 is about protecting the bat habitats, and paragraph 11 is a suggestion of how people can build bat houses in order to protect bats for years to come. Now, the interesting thing with this one is the first part of the passage, the majority of the passage, paragraphs 1 through 8, are mostly just about bats. So some students, you're going to see in the scoring guide, some students pulled evidence from this page with facts about bats and how they eat insects at night. A lot of kids pulled from paragraph 7, where they talk about eating the insects and how that helps the farmers to not have the insects killing their crops. And so they like to have the bats around. A lot of kids also cited the part about the 20 million bats in paragraph 3. This was also noted in paragraph 2. And in paragraph 4, it talks about how they hold on at night, how they hang upside down from the ceiling. And then when it's time to feed, they leave the bat cave. Okay, so that is the passage. Now we're going to dive into the scoring guide. This essay written by a student in the scoring guide got a 2 for organization and ideas, and it got a 1 for conventions. So it got a 3 out of 5 or a 6 out of 10. Now, what's interesting about this essay is it took the other side. I think the most obvious choice for this one would have been most kids probably wrote about closing, because the question, if you go back to the question, I'm going to real quick go back to the prompt. The question was, write a letter addressed to the town council about whether public access to the cave should be closed off. Okay. Most kids are going to say, yes, the bat cave, they're going to write to the town council and they're going to say the bat cave should be closed off to the public so that the bats are protected. That's what most kids are probably going to write about. However, this one is super interesting because it took the other side. And if you look at the red is the claim. It says the public. So it says, I say the Batcave should be open to the public. The public should be able to see what a Batcave looks like in person and not on a television screen. I love how this student took the other side and has a really strong reason. Notice the reason is not in the passage. The reason is from their own brain. So the red, the claim, this comes from their own brain. Yes, they're answering the question, but they're coming up with the reasons from their own brain. And then this student did another thing that was a little bit interesting, I thought, is they said the only time it should be closed is at night. So the whole thing is mostly about keeping it open to the public, but then it does have this little disclaimer that it should be closed at night. Despite this, it's still got a 6 out of 10. It has 2 pieces of evidence. One is about the $20 million $20 million, I wish, 20 million bats that roost there. Okay, that was one piece of evidence. The second blue piece of evidence was they pulled from the part about at the end of the article about making the bat house. Okay, so they actually made that a station in the museum that is now the Batcave, right? So I thought that was super creative. As long as they can take that evidence and make it support their claim, that is what counts. It does have a tiny bit of explaining, but not much. And that is why it did not get a 10 or a 9 or a 10, because it does not have very much explaining. And it does have some repetition. Okay. So let's move on to a one that got a higher score. So this one got a 10 out of 10. And I highlighted the claim red. So this one says closing off public access to Bat Cave in my town is a good idea because it will help protect the bats from people entering the cave or people trying to damage them. And then it gives 2 solid reasons. One reason is it will protect the bats from people entering and waking up the bats. The second reason is bats need protection because they're very important to the farmers and the plants since bats eat insects that consume this type of plant. So they did a really nice job kind of paraphrasing that into a reason. They have great evidence. They have 2 solid pieces of evidence, and they explained using if then. Look at this if then sentence in the 3rd paragraph. If we block public access to the bat cave, then bats will be safer. There's another if then in the last paragraph in the conclusion. If we don't protect bats, they could end up disappearing. So that cause and effect relationship really shows higher level thinking, and it's a complex sentence. So that is why this one got a 10 out of 10. Okay, now I'm going to look at a 4th grade paired passage. This one is interesting because one of the passages, well, let me just tell you, the prompt was explain whether or not people, explain whether or not people should make changes to traditional dishes. Now, I also want to point out, if you tell the kids, look in this 3rd paragraph, it will say argumentative essay, which I've highlighted, or it'll say argumentative composition. Also, in that first bullet point, it's going to say clearly state your claim instead of central idea, elementary school, controlling idea, 6th and 7th grade, or thesis, 8th grade and up. So it changes to the word claim when it's argumentative versus informational. The other thing I want to point out is that this one was interesting because both passages were informational. Look at this one. The first passage, according to Lead Forward, was literary nonfiction. And the thing that makes it literary nonfiction is that the author basically uses stories about people and narrative techniques to make a point. So it does have a little bit of a perspective, or, informational can often have a little bit of opinion in there. So that is the thing you got to keep in mind. But this is technically literary nonfiction. It's all about cooking the way grandma taught you with love. It's all about how it's more meaningful to cook food from scratch and how it brings connection to family. So even though this is informational, it has a definite perspective. The second passage is all about making changes to traditional foods in order to blend cultures, create new twists on the traditional dish, and make them more convenient or make them more well known. Now, I've talked to a lot of teachers about this from fourth grade. It does have a lot of interesting names that are a little bit difficult for kids, just like El Haraya from fifth grade. So if you look, there's a lot of tricky names and dishes in this article. But what I want to focus on is it does have evidence for both sides. If they go with the fact that you don't want to change the dishes, that would be more the first article. The second article, this one that we're looking at right now, is going to be more about creating those new twists and changing up traditional dishes. So let's look at this one. Got a 2, 1 point for organization and 1 point for conventions. Doubled would be a 4 out of 10. Notice it kind of looks like an SCR, doesn't it? So if it looks like an SCR, it's pretty much going to be a 1 for organization and ideas. If it only has one piece of text evidence and it answers the question correctly, that's considered weak or a 1. Okay, this one got an 8 out of 10. It scored 2 for organization and ideas and a 2 for conventions. It answered the question correctly. It has 4 pieces of text evidence, 2 per reason. It tried to explain, but it's too vague. And it does not have very good word choice. It uses words like cool. It does have a few sentences with because, but we're seeing a lot of repetition, and that is typical of a 2. Okay. So they basically gave 2 main reasons. Okay. This one got a 10 out of 10, and it answers the question. It has reasons in pink. It has 3 pieces of text evidence, 1 per reason. So this one is a little bit of a different format. It gave 3 reasons. The one before gave 2 reasons. That's not what matters. What really matters as far as the score is the explaining, which is in the green. Now notice this one does not even have a conclusion, but they counted that last sentence as a closing because it gave a personal connection. Okay. It's not technically a conclusion. I'm going to read it to you. It says, and personally, I would love to see 2 completely different cultures share a similarity. So it's kind of like giving their opinion about it, their little sass or their little connection that they're making in their world. So that's not technically a conclusion, but notice it's still got a 10 out of 10. So if it's mostly a 10 out of 10, and if it has strong reasons, if it has multiple pieces of evidence, if it's explaining well, and it has good transitions and word choice, but it doesn't have a conclusion, it can still get a 10. So we want to score these holistically, not checking all the boxes. Okay. And then the last, I think I doubled that slide. Okay. The last thing I want to tell you is where can you get argumentative resources? Where can you practice these with your students? Well, I've got you covered. Every single grade level from 3rd to English 2 has argumentative. Now, what I have done is I have written argumentative prompts, and I have also created sample answers that are going to be appropriate for that grade level. So one thing that I have that's super popular is, and these can all be found in the ECR VIP bundles for each grade level. So this picture that you're looking at on the left with the colored strips of paper. That is a super popular resource. The kids love it. This is a game changer. If you just do one thing, do this one activity, it's called Manners, and it's called Hands-On Revising. I'm going to link it in the description, but it really helps the kids to understand the structure of argumentative with reasons, evidence, and explaining. Okay. And this is for 3rd to 7th grade. If you are 8th grade and up, I have special argumentative puzzles that have the counter argument identified and refuted in purple. Okay. And those are going to be found in the VIP bundles. They will be labeled on the cover. It'll say argumentative as well as informational. So usually it's going to be the paired passage resource, but I do have some grade levels have some extra ones that are on either a paired passage or sometimes even a single passage. Okay. So 4th grade, for example, has Ricocheting Confetti. It is a paired passage and it has both sides of the argument. Okay. The other resource you could use is Storyworks has great debates that you could use my ECR question stems that are also in the VIP bundles. And those are good. You can use with any passage. Those are all different topics that you could find debates on, and those you can use as ECR question stems. But if you're looking for a prompt, a passage, and an answer, I would go with the VIP bundles, and I would either do Manners or I would do the paired passage that comes in there. And I do plan on making more argumentative for 3rd grade this week. I'm about to put out a new argumentative based on the reading workbook, Argumentative Passages. So that will be coming soon. You can find these if you go to carlinlaborio.com/# my-store. That way you can just click on your grade level and it'll take you right to the VIP bundles. So I hope this video helped. Let me know in the comments and make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more videos. Thanks. Bye.